فين يا أخي متشرفين.
تفضلي يا باشمهندسة.
السلام عليكم جميعا وصباح الإنجازات. خلوني بداية أعرفكم جنود هذه الجلسات اللي دائما يبدعوا في طرح هذه الحوارات ودائما يجتهدوا ويحضروا المواضيع جدا شيقة. بداية طبعا أعرف بمؤسس الشركة الأستاذ خالد الحريبي، ومن القسم التقني والحلول المهندس هاني العبري وجوهر الهطالي. وإذا رحنا طبعا للقسم الإبداعي والابتكاري لمخرجتنا المهندسة أنوال بيماني، ومعنا في قسم التدريب والقيمة المحلية المضافة المهندسة مروة الرجيلي. أرحب بضيوفنا بداية بالبروفيسور بالقاسم حبة، وهو غني طبعا عن التعريف، ولو جلسنا من اليوم لحد بكرة نعرفكم عن إنجازاته العلمية والعملية ما شاء الله، يعني ما هو نقدر ننجز في هذا الوقت. البروفيسور بالقاسم حبة حاصل على شهادة الدكتوراه في الطاقة الشمسية من جامعة ستانفورد في أمريكا، وهو نائب رئيس شركة إكسبير. أدرج ضمن قائمة أفضل 100 مخترع على مستوى العالم، وما شاء الله عنده أكثر من 2000 براءة اختراع عالمية. ومن اختراعات بروفيسور بالقاسم اللي كلنا يعني نعرفها اللي هي الرقائق الإلكترونية الموجودة في هواتفنا الذكية، الموجودة في أجهزة الكمبيوتر وغيرها من أجهزة التكنولوجيات الدقيقة. أهلا وسهلا بك بروفيسور، نورتنا اليوم.
متشرفين يا أختي.
مدير حوارنا لهذه الجلسة الدكتور عمار العجيلي. الدكتور حاصل على دكتوراه في الهندسة المدنية، ولها عدة إنجازات في حياته المهنية ما شاء الله، بحيث أن ابتدأ كمحاضر في كليات التقنية، وانتهى بعمادة كلية التقنية في صلالة، وبعد ذلك انضم إلى تكاتف عمان، وهو حاليا رئيس مبادرة الابتكار إذا سمعتوا عنها سبلة إكس في شركة أوكيو. أهلا وسهلا بك دكتور، نورتنا.
أهلا وسهلا بكم وشكرا على الاستضافة.
يا مرحبا فيك. الحين بنتكلم عن الأجندة. بالنسبة للأجندة المقدمة بتكون 10 دقائق، الحوار بين البروفيسور والدكتور بيكون 30 دقيقة، وآخر شيء بنترك لكم المجال للأسئلة. قبل أن نبدأ إن شاء الله بطرح عليكم سؤال. السؤال برأيكم ما هي أهم مهارات مؤسسات المستقبل؟ المخرج؟ أوكي. هل هي مهارات الثورة الصناعية الرابعة، أم مهارات الإبداع والابتكار، أم المهارات الناعمة مثل التواصل أو غيرها؟
ما هي أهم مهارات
مؤسسات
المستقبل؟
In my views, at least, I tend to see things slightly different. For me, the role of institution, مؤسسات أو أي شيء, the role is to solve a problem for the humanities, for human beings, and make their lives better. That's all it is. We are here to solve problems. It doesn't matter whether we're using fourth revolution, innovation, non-innovation. All it is we are trying to solve problems in our lives. So that's how I look at it. Our role and the role of any companies is absolutely to solve the problems. Probably I did pick the right one.
Very interesting.
There's no right one.
I went off.
No, بالعكس. Very interesting point.
طبعا ما شاء الله 60% قالوا مهارات الإبداع والابتكار، 27% رجحوا إلى مهارات الثورة الصناعية الرابعة، و13% المهارات الناعمة اللي مثل التواصل. فإن شاء الله بنشوف يعني في ختام الحوار إن شاء الله إذا يعني وش هو الجواب المتوقع. الحين حابة أقدم لكم نبذة بسيطة عن الشركة. نحن شركة إرث متكاملة أو Impact Integrated، متخصصين في مجال تقنيات الثورة الصناعية الرابعة، بالتحديد الذكاء الاصطناعي. وبعد في Impact نريد نسوي أثر نافع في العالم باستخدام الصوت. زين. وطبعا مؤسس الشركة هو الأستاذ خالد الحريبي. ومن عنوان الجلسة يمكن يكون مبهم للبعض، يعني وش هو الاقتصاد البرتقالي؟ بخبركم الاقتصاد البرتقالي باختصار. الاقتصاد البرتقالي هو أن نبتكر ونصنع منتج ينتج عنه ملكية فكرية. وكشركة إرث كان لنا توجه يعني في هذا المجال من ناحية المشاريع التي تم عمل عليها، مثل مشروع منار. مشروع منار هو عبارة عن شات بوت يتفرع إلى عدة أقسام، دمجنا فيه الذكاء الاصطناعي مع الذكاء العاطفي، بحيث أن المحادثة تكون قريبة يعني من كلام الإنسان. أول شيء بنبدأ بمنار للاستدامة. منار للاستدامة أو sustainability هي مختصة في تقديم ريبورت GRI بطريقة سهلة للمساهمين، وأيضا تقدم تحليل وتصوير للبيانات المتعلقة بالطاقة المستدامة، مثل أجهزة تنظيف الألواح الشمسية. وأيضا عندنا منار للعناية بالزبون الكاستمر كير. طبعا العناية بالزبون في المقام الأول دائما في كل الشركات. ومنار بتهتم فيكم وراح تحلل شخصيات الزبائن، وبتساعدكم كثير في تحسين أداء وعمل مؤسستكم. وبعد عندنا منار للصحة النفسية. طبعا يعني كنا نعرف أن نفسية الفرد في العمل يلعب دور كبير في الإنجاز، فاللي يحتاج إلى طاقة إيجابية يتوجه إلى منار النفسية. ويمكن تتحدثوا مع منار بكل شفافية، وإن شاء الله يعني هي بتمدكم بالطاقة. عندنا بعد منار في التريننج تالنت هاب، فيها تحليل لبيانات المتدربين وبعد تقييم لأدائهم. وأخيرا عندنا تحليل وتصوير البيانات في منار للصناعات التحويلية وبعد في البزنس انتليجنت. عندنا نحن في شركة إرث نأمل أن منار تقدم 10 أضعاف العائد للاستثمار لمؤسساتكم. في شركة إرث بعد عندنا 3 منصات. أول منصة اللي هي تريننج تالنت هاب. التريننج تالنت هاب تسهم في تدريب الشباب في الذكاء الاصطناعي، إنترنت الأشياء، الطباعة ثلاثية الأبعاد والأتمتة. وفيها بعد تقييم لأداء المتدربين، وأهم شيء فيها الماتش ميكينج between the company والمتدرب. بعدين عندنا منصة نامي، وهي مبادرة وطنية تساعد في الصناعات التحويلية، وما شاء الله الدكتور عمار هو البروجكت ليدر. ونامي يعني اختصار لي National Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Initiative، وفيها آلية تحليل توقعي لحالات كوفيد-19 مثل كيف شفتوا فوق. زين. وبعد فيها بيع وشراء الأقنعة الطبية والفنتليترز. وعندنا في المنصة الأخيرة اللي هي منصة LMI، أو يمكن نقول إنها Labor Market Intelligence، فيها تحليل وتصور البيانات للقوى العاملة يعني. الهدف من إنشاء هذه المنصات كان تحقيق الاستدامة والاستفادة من البيانات التي تم تحليلها، وكنا نريد نحسن من جودة وأداء وكفاءة المؤسسة أو المنتج. وبرأينا منار يجب أن تتواجد في كل مؤسسة لتحقيق هذه القيمة. متشوقين جدا أن نكتسب المعرفة من هذه الجلسة. قبل أن نبدأ الحوار بنشوف هذا الفيديو.
Well, for more on the Colombian elections and what's next for the country, I'm joined by Juan Gonzalez. He's an Associate Vice President for the Cohen Group and a former Deputy U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So let's start with a look at the economy that Ivan Duque is inheriting. How does that match up with his economic plan to stimulate the economy?
He has actually developed an entire campaign on the innovation economy, what he calls the Orange Economy. Right now, you have a Colombia that needs to diversify its sources of income. It has probably 20% of its economy depends on commodities, on oil specifically. So it suffered significantly during the drop in oil prices. That's been a tendency throughout most of Latin America. And what countries and economies like Colombia need to do, they need to get into services. They need to actually figure out how to get into the next level of the innovation economy. And Duque's campaign plan, which I think benefited a lot from his time at the Inter-American Development Bank, I've seen him talk about it. He has a very concrete idea to actually upgrade the nation's infrastructure. The Orange Economy concept that he talks about is about using Colombia's cultural heritage, fashion, architecture, indigenous tradition as something that actually can bring benefit to the country. I think there's a statistic that, I think it was last year, that the Colombian economy, 4% of it was the Orange Economy. And so that's something that can actually expand significantly.
دكتور عمار الميكروفون عندك الحين.
Thank you, Samira. Prof, before we go into the Orange Economy and whether you agree with the video or not, and what your take on it, we would like to know you more as a person. So would you be kind enough to tell us about your upbringing, about your education? I'm not sure if all of us know that you were born and raised in Algeria, but spent most of your life outside Algeria. Would you be kind enough to share your story with us?
Yeah. أولا thanks a lot. شكرا على السؤال. Well, I was born, in fact, in the middle of the Sahara Desert in Algeria. In fact, in a small oasis from a family that is a farming family, نخيل وأشياء. You have seen earlier on some of the date trees I had. Basically, and a very modest family. I mean, your average family. And, my mom and dad and all my family never went to school. I'm the first one that went to university. So basically, in fact, I always brag about. I have never seen electricity until I was at the age of 13. So we never had electricity around where I lived. Until I went to high school, I have never seen electricity. So I was lucky that at that time Algeria just became independent, and the government was looking to educate the population, and they are looking for kids. And I was in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and I was doing okay in school, so they kept pumping me up. They say, okay, this kid seems to be doing okay in school. Let's keep paying for him, and otherwise my father would have done nothing. He would not have afford. He has 11 kids to take care of. So, I end up moving. I left my village when I was very, very young, and there is no schools in my village except for the elementary school at the time, middle school. I went to high school in another place, 100 kilometers away, and finished, and ended up doing my bachelor degree in الجزائر العاصمة. So and all I knew is math and physics. That's the only thing I knew. Everything else I was really bad at it. So so I was selected to go and study the sciences. So I ended up doing physics. I finished my education. I finished my bachelor in 1980. And there, out of the blue, the government decided, oh, we need some higher education people, and we have some money here. We want to educate you guys. And so I put my name on the list, and here it goes. I found myself in the US. Never heard of any school in the US except of Berkeley. So I started applying. Remember, just let people know that at that time there is no computers and there is no things. Everything has to be written by hand, and so I sent applications to few universities, and never heard of Stanford, even though I was there. So I applied to a lot of places, and I got accepted. And my only criteria at that time to check for a school is which school is the furthest south So seeking heat, being from Sahara Desert, heat is my first parameter. So, and Stanford was the lowest of all the schools that I had, so I ended up going to Stanford. So that's how I end up. So I did 2 masters, one in applied physics and one in material science. Then I decided to do a PhD. I did a PhD in solar energy. I thought I would do something that would be useful when I return to Algeria. Then from there, that's basically how I end up until I finish my schooling. If you want, I could tell you a little bit about what happened afterward, but it depends. You asked me about my upbringing, so that's what it is.
It's an interesting story. No electricity for 13 years, had to
Yes.
leave your village to get some education. You went through some hardships.
No, it's not. It's not, in fact. If you don't know that it exists, how do you know that you are missing it? So I never knew it existed. So and since there is no electricity, that means there is no TV, no refrigerators, no phones. All these things, they are related, right? So I never knew all these things. So.
And how did that have an impact on what you do now, what you've been doing since the 1980s in terms of going into innovation, working on microchips? Is there a relationship that you see now, between your upbringing, not having access to these things, and suddenly, moving into applied physics, material science, solar, and then being exposed to what's happening in the West?
Probably the biggest thing that happened is I see things differently than most people, because I have spent some times in my life where we had nothing, literally, and we have to do things like thinking out of the box. So if you didn't have all these tools that people have today, so I learned how to do things without it. And I was good at it. I was told that when I was a kid, I did good. In fact, my grandfather, Allah yarhamu Ali, used to tell them that this kid, he see me tinker with things, and so he used to tell them that this kid is going to go somewhere. But he didn't know somewhere what it means, because for us at that time, somewhere was 100 kilometers away. That was the furthest we used to go.
Terasa.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah. It had an impact that I think I'm always trying to think differently. Always think about is there another way of doing things, and how to turn things always to basic. Return to basic. Why do you do things? Why do people do it this way? It helped also that through my life, I lived in different cultures. I lived in Algeria. Even in Algeria, I lived in Sahara Desert in a small. And then I lived in the US, different culture. Then I found myself living in Japan, so different culture. That has probably a bigger impact on how I look at things, because they do think completely different. And instead of saying, okay, that somebody is wrong or right, it just happened that people think differently. And if you sit down in the back and you say, okay, I want to learn how they do it and why they do it this way, you'll end up learning quite a bit of things in the process.
So along the journey, you picked different perspectives or different ways of looking at matters. One interesting point, though, Professor, if somebody followed your career, chances are that he or she would have ended up in academia, continuing in terms of teaching, research. What drove you out of academia into industry?
An amazing question, because I almost ended up in academia. And two things, I always ask this question before, and I will tell you two things happened. One of them is I almost got a professor position at Stanford, and I refused it after I realized what the salary is. So the pay does not, it's not at the level, but that's not, I always joke about it. But when I was a kid, my father used to always tell me, my son, if you grow up, learn how to make things. Learn how to, we have the screws and things. My father was also a fallah, yani. So he did not know even how a screw is done. So he always tried to figure out how did they end up making this screw, right? So he told me, I want you when you grow up to be able to make a screw. And I go, oh, wow, that I got so far. So, but one of the most important parameter, I mentioned it once, and Khalid probably remember, I gave a talk 2-3 years ago when I visited Muscat. And when I was in my last year for PhD, and I grew up in Algeria, so we go and study, you finish, and without thinking, you go back to teach, or you work for the government. So basically, we created a cyclic system that's self-defeating, that would lead nowhere, because the system is impossible to absorb all the young people coming. And you cannot be all in the service industry. So, and I was thinking the same way, because I was brainwashed like everybody else. In my last year of college, there is two classmates that came to see me, and they said, I was in Stanford in my last year. And they came to me and said, we want to do a startup. This is in 1986 timeframe. Never heard of the word startup at that time. We want to do a startup. I was doing very good in school, so they told me, you know quite a bit about the technology side. We want you to be CTO of the group. And we run the company, and we make, they wanted to make a company on making equipment that make chips, how to develop, manufacture chips. That was the, and I told them no. I was sent here with the goal to go back and teach in Algeria. That was my goal. That was not the goal. That was what I had in mind. That's all I thought about. 2 years later, I ran into these two guys, and they were doing an exhibition in a conference, and they had the equipment in a conference, and they were standing there. So when I went to talk to them, and I said, so which company are you working for? And they told me, this is the company we discussed. And it's too bad you didn't join us. And the biggest thing that changed my life, all my life, is exactly that moment when I realized here, there are people that really believed in me, and I didn't believe in myself. They believed I am capable of doing things. I never knew that I have that belief, because nobody told me. I never got educated that I'm capable to do something. And if there is a point in my life that changed my life, must be that point exactly. And that's when I decided, from now on, I will learn what a startup is, how to make a startup, how what to do, and I should get involved in this phenomenon. Whether I succeed or not, it's not. So that's how I end up in the industry. I don't know whether it explained a little bit how I got into it.
It does, Professor. So Ibn al-Sahra developed self-belief at that particular point.
Yeah, it's and it still is the problem of our societies. we're creating a system that we generate people, and we don't teach them that at the end they can go and work on themselves.
Mm.
We teach them that when they get out, راح المينستر, this ministry, راح this, you work for, you teach, you work for this guy, and always use an example. I keep always telling, there is a saying that I always use, says, we live life only once. Either you're gonna live your dreams, or you're gonna live the dream of somebody else. So get it in your head. It's your dream or the dream of somebody else. You decide.
Thank you, Prof. You have a long, interesting career, so I will not attempt to explore it in full because I'm cognizant of the time. But in a quick snapshot, you worked for Xperi for 17 years, left for Google for a couple of years, and then went back to Xperi. Can you give us an overview of what you did in Xperi? Why did you leave to Google? And what did you do in Google, if you can disclose? And then why did you go back to Xperi again?
Well, so I'll go fast, because first, time is not an issue for me. You can stay as long as it's up to you guys. In fact, let me run by. I got out of school. I worked for the IBM Yorktown Heights. It's one of the best centers that exist in the world. I learned so many things. And from there, I'll go quick on the scenery. From there, I decided I'm going to go back to Algeria and work in Algeria. That's my dream. Is I have to go and pay back. So I ended up going in 1990. That's exactly when the civil war in Algeria started, and I'm in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And it exactly started where I was living. So I lasted only a few months. I packed my stuff and I left for Japan. So I worked for NEC for 6 years. I was in all this, I was developing some, no need to, it's an application of laser in microelectronics and stuff like this. It's some sort of, my life is all in research. Then from there, I was hired permanently in Japan, by the way. So, but in 1996, for a personal reason, I decided circumstances and makatib, yani. My son was born special need child and needs some special attention. So circumstances I had to leave and go someplace where they can take care of him. And that's California. So I ended up going to California. When I returned to California, I decided this is the place where I had that big dream, where I learned that I should do something. So I decided from now on, it's going to be only startups. So I joined this company called Tessera. We started it. This is around 95, 96. And, Tessera became Xperi, changed name later on. So, but it's the name. So, in a short story, the idea of our idea at the time was the phone was so big, to miniaturize it to become so small that people can handle it. How to make that. So we developed the technologies and end up that technology at the basis of all the phones that exist today. And we get paid for every phone that sells in the world, I guess. Not me personally, but at least the company. So it sold close to 300 billion units all over the world. And it's all over now in the phone. Anyway, so that's the startup, Tessera, the company went public and all these. Then I decided I'm going to go and work for a company called Rambus because they're developing a new memory that use Tessera's technologies. So they asked me to move there. So I moved to Rambus. I worked for a few years there. Then I decided, no. Once you get into this startup mode, you become crazy a little bit. It's become like a sickness. You become always on your toes. So I worked for Rambus. This is also a startup at that time when it became very big. It's a very big company now, multinational. And I decided, no, I quit, I got out, and I got out and I made another startup called Silicon Pipe. And the economy collapsed and I ended up selling that company to Samsung. Then I went back to Tessera, that the Xperi now. I went to there. They want me back because they need somebody to lead technology. So I was leading the technology for a while. Then we had Wall Street attack. They wanted to take over the company. I did not like that, so I left. And I went to Google. And in Google, I was involved with, probably, I'm not going to tell you exactly what I did, but due to contractual stuff. But I worked on the first and the second AI machine that got developed by Google. So that was my project, and how to make the data center capable to handle all the, from a hardware point of view. I'm not a software guy, so how do you make a center capable to handle all this flow of information coming? Remember at that time when I joined them, if everybody in the world that are in Google platform, if everybody spoke on the phone for 3 minutes, the Google will collapse. Incapable to handle everybody in the world speaking for 3 minutes just to translate your voice, it would have collapsed. So it was very important that we have to develop a way how to handle that one. And the second thing came in AI came in. And how to handle AI. AI needs a lot of processing power, and how to do that. So I was involved in the first and the second accelerators. I made the first and the second. And then here people look at some people run after money, some people run after companies. For me, I run after technologies. If I sit in a place and I found that I'm not going to be able to invent new technologies, I will become restless and I leave. It doesn't matter who it is. So in Google, I found myself in that position. It's a very good company. There's no, but it's not for me. I want, for two reasons, technology that I develop in Google, you are at the bottom of the food chain. I develop hardware. Google is whoever develops software is at the top. So I don't see the bigger picture. I want to be able in a company where I understand everything, and I know where everything is going, and I know my contribution, and I'm driving that thing. So that's probably it's schizophrenia from my side. So I end up getting out. I wanted to do another startup, but my previous company said like they were running out of, they need somebody to drive, because I have always was responsible of that technology. So I guess they decided to get me back. So I end up going back there. So that's the whole scenario why I moved. I moved back and forth. But I have been with Xperi or Tessera from 1995, from the time where I started the company.
Well, I'm glad that I asked the question. I personally learned about one of your drivers. My next question is crossed out already. What drives you? Obviously, what drives you is technology, seeing the big picture, and seeing your work, realizing its potential in the place you're working in.
Yeah, people tell me about people are looking for money and this and getting to be known, and for me, I'm completely out. In fact, I have with this company, I had a deal with them to come back. Part of my contract, nobody reports to me. I refuse to have people reporting to me because I want to spend my time developing ideas. I don't want to be spending my time, somebody is sick, somebody has to take a vacation, didn't come, or he doesn't get along with somebody else. That's not my business. I have done it in the past and I had enough. I want to spend my time reading, trying to see what people are doing, where technology is going, that's more interesting to me. So I know what I want, and that's exactly what they leave me alone. I will create something for you in the long run, and that's all it is. That's what drives me. And of course, I tell people that everywhere, since we are discussing in family here, basically, the way I do things are quite, and I think it works for me. I always do goals. I set goals at the end of the year and a goal in 5 to 10 years. I always know that at the end of the year, I know where I want to be. Every year, I set my goal. For example, I want to have 20 patents this year, for example. I have to develop a new technology, completely new technology that will impress people, whatever. You set this goal by the end of the year. And you have one goal that's in 5 or 10 years, you're going to reach it. That's a bigger goal. Usually those are fuzzy a little bit, not well described. But the one within a year should be well described. You know exactly what you're going to do. And at the end of the year, it's a judgment day. You have to sit with yourself because you can lie to anybody. I could lie to you and I did this and I did this and I could lie my eyes out. But you cannot lie to yourself. If you sleep in bed and you start judging yourself, this is my goal, what did I do? Did I spend the time really, or was I messing around, just having fun, playing soccer, which I do most of the time, and going to shopping centers and all that stuff? And did I spend the time to do it? Things happen. Sometimes, a lot of things happen. Somebody gets sick. You think, as long as you have reason to why you reach your goal. So that's, I really tell people, if you learn this habit, it's very good. So I have goals every year. I know exactly what I'm going. I don't tell anybody what my goals are. Otherwise, people will judge me. I want to judge myself.
تسلم Professor, جزاك خير. My other question relates to reading, but I'm gonna keep that for a little while. Let me ask you about failure, Prof. Because people see successful people, they think that their paths were laid with roses. And they went from success to the next, to the next. I want to see the other side of it, failures. Can you recall something that you did not succeed to your standard at, and what did you learn from that, from that, if I call it failure?
I really like the CEO of Page, CEO of Google. He says, if you set your plans, and if you come at the end of the year and you tell me I succeeded 80% in my plan, he said, you failed for me. He doesn't want anybody to be over 60% success. You should fail a lot, because you're going to learn only from failure. You never learn from success. I mean, failure, you're going to see why you fail. Success, it comes and you're happy and you forget even why, who helped you in the process, how things get. Did I fail? Oh my God, I probably 80% of my time. I'm surprised that people still pay me and give me money to allow me to do things, because of the number of failure I have done. The thing that you have to learn is you're going to fail in doing research. You start research, but you start doing research with the goal to reach some place, right? With time. I'm going to do this one within a year. I'm going to spend this much time, whether it's for the company or for your own yourself. And I'm going to do this startup, for example. I'm going to reach this goal within this date, and I'm willing to sacrifice this much of money. It has to be all calculated risk. But once you reach the time that reach, you cannot mess with it. The time has come. You fail, just accept the failure and move on. Do something else. I had like gazillion project never worked. You want to have once in a while having good project that work that pays for everything else. Otherwise, people will stop believing in you. But at least you have to have a clear idea to your failures. And I remember I went on a project once, and I was trying to do, and I needed like $5 million to do it. And it was one of my worst things. So I took the $5 million and I started the project, but I did not look at all the angle of the parameters that I'm doing. And it turned out I did not study it very well. So the $5 million went in the air. Lucky I'm in the US. In the US, I could go back and say, I lost $5 million. I have another idea. Give me another $10 million. And usually they give you. Anywhere else, they will. It's with the end of your day.
So yes, appetite for failure for organizations that want to innovate.
Yes.
Is definitely something big. They have to have it, otherwise.
And all these people, especially people who are doing startup, if you think your startup, you're 100% sure it's going to succeed, you do not have a good idea. Your idea is not a front idea. That's not a high technology ideas. You know, when you start, your guess is in the right direction, your heart in the right direction. You are going to solve a big problem, but you are like 60% sure it's going to work. The rest, you're going to work on it in the process. But if you are from the beginning 100% sure everything you know, all matter of doing it only, then you are not doing a serious problem. You are not solving a serious issue here. You're just solving a problem that exists, a random problem.
You're not stretching the envelope. I hear an alarm. So how are we doing with time, guys? Samira, Khalid?
We're good. We're really enjoying the conversation, and it's totally up to you. And if as long as the professor time allows and your time allows.
And my time allows for you guys. I am here even until the morning.
إن شاء الله تعالى.
شكرا بروفيسور.
إن كان حبيبك عسل لا تلحسه كله زي ما يقولوا، خلي قليل منه. لكن سنستفيد من وقتك بإذن الله يا بروفيسور.
يقول له إذا كان صاحبك عسل أكله والكل.
Allah يحفظك, Prof. If I may, Prof, I would like to move to the next question. Yeah. What does your day look like, and what do you read?
Well, this is very interesting. So I'm going to say something probably is going to shock everybody. I work from 7 to 7 since 1992. Roughly time. 92, 93. 7 to 7. I never work at night. In fact, I do not have computer at home. By design. So I do not bring work at home. I do not work at night. It doesn't work for everybody like me. So I work from 7 to 7, do all my work. I don't leave anything to later on. When I come home, it's for home and family. And I never work on weekend. Never. And I have never worked on weekend. I have never worked at night, except for this Corona messed up my thing. They pushed me at home. I brought my computer from work, and I'm doing Zoom. But still, at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., even at home, I close my computer and I stop. My case is special. I have a special need child. My wife spends the whole day with him. I take care of him at night. And I take care of him on the weekend. So I tell people, it doesn't matter, you do startup and everything. Family is more important. Family is, that's what lasts in the long run. So as far as reading, a lot of technical papers, unfortunately, but I do read a lot about the Algerian Revolution. most Algerian, you ask them, they will tell you probably the same thing. We are still tied to our ثورة التحرير and what happened, our history, stuff like this one. Why did we end up where we end up? And this is in the mind of most of us. So history is a big thing. The other thing is I'm interested in the agriculture. Probably it's obvious why. So I do a lot of agriculture. In fact, I have in my backyard, I have my own research lab in agriculture. So, but that's on my part-time. So I do read a lot on agriculture, water, environment, and stuff like this as a hobby, and from education point of view. Yeah. But mostly it's history that I spend time on.
You opened the window into your private life, Prof, with regards to your firstborn, am I right? Who is a special case?
Yes.
May we ask what his name is, or her?
Sami.
Sami. And can I ask what the condition is? Out of learning and education, if it is to private.
No. I tell people, unfortunately, Zad مريض عنده his special needs, severely handicapped, and has autism, mental retardation, name it, you have it. So he stays home and take care of him. كل شيء بالمكاتيب يعني كل واحد عنده أعطاه الرب سبحانه. And in fact, I tell people this is one second point. I told you about 1986 point that changed my life. This is my second one. When my son was born, 93. So that's why I changed my style of doing work and all that. So, and it turned out to be for the best. When you have my first kid and you're thinking about your first kid, and all you dream about, you think is my son is going to run the 100 dash in the Olympics and I will be watching there and raising the flag and all that stuff. And suddenly things doesn't work the way you planned for it. So you get in a state of rethinking your life, what's life is all about, why God selected me and all that stuff. And out of all that comes out that God is reminding you that life has different purposes rather than just research and doing all that. There are other stuff you have to arrange in your life. Reshuffle your life. Adjust. There are people around you that are more important. And it turned out it's a good waking call, and my life has moved differently than where it was going before. Alhamdulillah. Shukran Rabb subhanahu.
Alhamdulillah.
Barakallahu feekum wa baraka fee. You reset your priorities. I think a few of us do share similar stories. I do have a special kid that a special needs kid at home. Henceforth, the question.
So you're walking in my shoes.
Yes, indeed. Alhamdulillah, you see the angle. You see why. After a while, maybe you question first. You're right. But then as you go through it, you understand why. The big picture is different.
وكل إنسان يجيب مكتوبه.
صحيح. جزاكم الله خيرا. I'm almost exhausting my questions. I have two more, if I may, Khalid.
Yes.
جزاكم الله خيرا. I'll come to the technical questions, Prof. We started with a video about the Orange Economy, and basically what it was saying is taking the culture of a nation or a group of people, and then innovating on it. And there is a big link between it and the digital economies that we currently have. Do you agree with such a definition? And if yes, or if no, what's your own interpretation of it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the innovation is a permanent thing. We do it through life. People have been innovating to make their lives better. This is not something new. What's new is countries have spent most of the time on resources, natural resources, and suddenly they realize that you can do better with the innovation, innovating to make life better, innovating to make better medicine, healthcare, how to have better agriculture. Remember, the population is getting bigger. The land is not getting any bigger. So we're going to be dividing the resources and how to improve those resources to be able to satisfy all of us. So, and to do that, we need a lot of innovation. And diseases, for example, this is the biggest problem. Now it's in hit, like corona and all that stuff. How are we going to guarantee our societies to be healthy in the future? We are not going to. But to do those, you cannot just bring innovation from outside and things from outside and implement. It doesn't work. I'll tell you, probably Aljazair or Oman is very similar. We grew up in a culture that's unique. Some other countries might have similar ones. Unique in an aspect that when we grow up, we don't question our parents. We don't question our grandparents. Whatever the elder says goes. So we learn to obey and do things, right? So that tends to hinder the innovation. So we have to learn how to adapt innovation to the culture we have. You cannot come to your parents and say, this is not how you do things. So you never see the end of it. So we have to learn how to move the innovation on the culture that we have. There are things that people would not accept. So we have to figure out how to innovate within those norms of innovation so that the society will accept those things. So, but beside that, technology is moving. And the biggest problem is in the West, they develop things to solve their own problems. But we tend to have problems in our own societies that are unique to us. And Khaled, I talked to him many times before about, I always bring, I grew up with dates. تمر ونخل وإلى غير ذلك. So from the day I was born up to today, the way they treat dates, the way they cut them, the way they climb the trees, the tool they use, they have never changed a bit. Our ancestors have developed the tools. In fact, I was in the museum of Muscat. I was watching and I found a tool there that we have the same one. And I was surprised it has the same name, Mahasha. And in fact, it has the same name. I hear in there, it changed the name, but in Algeria, it still has the same name like that. So we should not be today, as of today, climbing a date tree that's 20 meters high. Somebody's climbing to cut those things and down. The number of trees is increasing, the time is short, and how are we going to innovate? Nobody is going to come from the West to solve those problems. I'm just bringing a problem that nobody is going to solve unless we solve it from inside. How do we make it cheaper, better productivities? Those are for things that we need. For Aljazair, we have desertic areas. Aljazair, 95% is all desert. How are we going to turn this one in very highly productive areas for agriculture, for things? That's why I got involved in agriculture, specifically that angle. But these are what I call that we have to use technologies and innovate in the, we have diseases that's unique to areas that we are in. How can we treat them? How can we do diagnostics? Stuff like this. This is how the technology comes in the help. AI is going to play an amazing role in solving a lot of this problem. And people are going to use it on things that are usually people use by hand and things like, and add smartness to it. There's no reason why this thing don't become smart. My microwave, when I'm holding a plate with a pizza going to my microwave should know automatically that I am holding a pizza. So he knows exactly how many minutes they're going to put and how much heat going to put without asking me or me pushing buttons. So so all these are how to make a house efficient. So we're going to see a big revolution. And if we're going to wait until somebody else is going to do it for us, they're going to do it on their own norm, on their own cultural stuff, applying to their own system. And I'm sorry to say this, but I mentioned it to Khalid before. I have a friend of mine who is a cartoonist. And he does cartoon. And in one of his cartoon, اكتب فيها يا أهل الكفار متى تعطونا دواء الكوفيد. So it's highly, so we got ingrained in our head that we have to wait for somebody else to do things for us. And this is where we should work.
In essence, what you're saying is ما حك جلدك مثل ظفرك.
Yeah.
We solve our own problems, or else no one is going to do that.
Yeah. Or they're going to solve it, but solve it differently. Mm-hmm. Then we have to pay for excess of. I was in. I developed the technology in 1997, 98. That was for the phone and all this. And I was giving a talk in Japan. And I was giving, in my presentation, the president of Hitachi was there. Hitachi. So I gave the presentation, and after I finished, I said, my thing is highly reliable. There is a certain norm in how you count reliability. I told them mine is 3,000 cycles of reliability, which is very long. Usually by 500 to 1,000 is okay. And at the end of the talk, he came to me, he said, why am I paying for the extra reliability? So he wanted to fail right. He said, can you make it cheaper and fail earlier? So we have to do things according to our societies. I mean, think that what we do.
What's missing, Professor? I mean, where we need to go is clear to us. It's clear to you.
Yeah.
But what is missing in the process? Initial elements.
Here you're hitting a very, very important point. What's missing is a vision. Usually we need a vision. A vision doesn't require but vision usually that are government visions. This is long-term visions. But what the biggest problem need is an ecosystem. The ecosystem is what makes things work. Silicon Valley is not different than any other place. We have the same weather in our part of the world. We have what it takes. We miss the ecosystem. I always mention that if you create the ecosystem, everything works behind it. But we never figure out how to make the ecosystem, because the ecosystem is like a discussion I had with Khalid once. الإيكوسيستم صار له كي الدين الإسلامي. عندنا أعمدة، عندنا we have legs, we stand on. عندنا 5 عندنا الشهادة الصلاة والزكاة والحج والصيام على من استطاع. Those are the 5 pillars that we need for a religion to stand. Then the rest is how we use it, what we do, how we perform these things. The ecosystem is the same thing. It has certain pillars. They need to be there if you want it to work. Then how do we work in that ecosystem is just modality how we do it. But the pillar need to be there. And the pillars are usually 4. I always tell people there are only 4 pillars. We can make them 5 if we want to make them like Islam. So that's the most important thing. If you allow me, I can go further in describing what the pillars are. Okay?
تفضل Professor.
Please, Professor.
So in an ecosystem, the pillar of an ecosystem are one is an educated, how would say, how should I put the right word? You have a manpower that's educated, highly educated, but not only educated, you go to university, come out, that has the ability to do engineering, have know-how. So that's one pillar. You cannot form an ecosystem without having good engineers, I mean, it doesn't have to be only engineers. You need all the package. So you have an education system with people that are well-trained. That's one. The second one is the financial. You have to be able to fund. The funding system is very important. And I'm telling you, all these pillars, if one of them is missing, the table will fall off. It will never work. So you have to have an institution that's there to fund these young people that have ideas, and they're there. If they come up with their ideas, they'll say, okay, your idea is good. And I bring between parentheses here, people tend to, at least in our part of the world, the government comes in and makes some entity in the government responsible for funding. And I always say that would never work. It would never, this is the modality, by the way. I'm just coming in probably I should come back to the funding later on. So the funding. The third is the economy that you have should be able to buy products that are created by these companies. If your economy, you have people coming and doing a new product, and like Akhi Khalid and do impact the company, but the industry that doesn't buy his product is not going to go anywhere. So it has to be that counterpart that people are willing to buy the product of that person. So, and the fourth one that I always put, the fourth leg that I always put is the IP, intellectual property, protection of intellectual properties. You could say that at the beginning, probably in our part of the world, you can put it to the side and say, okay, let's omit it for the time being. But it's very, very important, especially if you are developing something very good. If you are not protected and nobody is going to protect you from a legal point of view, that I do it and somebody come in and takes it, you say, why I spend my money to develop something? It takes me a lot of money. So those are the fourth pillar that I have. Those are my 4 pillars to an ecosystem. I'll go back to my parentheses that I closed on in one of the pillars. It's the financials. Why I said financial should be an institution that's not led by government. And for the simple reason, government has the role. The government, their goal is to create jobs and make sure that everybody, wherever they are in a country, they all have equal opportunity. That means if it is within the government, they will make sure the money is divided from this state and this state and this state and this city, so they would not create discrimination. The idea of giving money for the best idea is discriminatory in its definition. You have to look for the best, even if they come from all of them from the same village. And for that, you need an entity that does not look, they don't care, as long as they're looking only for the best ideas. And the other one is, I talked about the first pillar is the education, educating the population, that you have population that's well educated. We have, I mean, if I have seen, these days, the education is going so fast. I will take for example, my daughter always, I joke with my daughter. So my daughter is born, she has never known anything but Google since she was born. We grew up, Google did not exist. If you look at our education, if we based everything on our education, it's useless because all the stuff that existed came after our education. So how do we teach our people for the next generation education is coming? The next Google, the next things. There are things. So educating people, the system that we are doing today where we teach them, learn these, أحفظ هذه, أحفظ هذه, and getting them out and that's it, that doesn't work. So we need to teach logic. We need to teach people how to think. And that should be the biggest program in the education system, how to lead people that they can think for themselves to do things. We should not get people, it shows that they finish their education. I get email from people from master and PhD, and could you tell me what topic should I do for my thesis? I mean, at that level, they're still asking somebody else to do something for them. Where should I do? Where can I find a job? These, suddenly we got caught into a dilemma where in the education we teach people, we are not teaching them logical thinking. That you get out, you have a gazillion things, use your head, there is logic into doing things. And that, I believe that we should work on that.
Thank you very, very much, Professor. I've learned a lot through your responses to my questions. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah,
Khalid, I think it's time we open it to our audience who've been patiently listening and probably eager to ask their questions. So over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Dr. And now the floor is open. And I think, Dr. Ammar, if you see the chat, there were some points. There was from Sultan Subhi and Professor. So, Dr. Ammar, if you'd like to also take a stab at the question, he's asking about the patents and what's the value of IPs? He included them in the ecosystem. And yeah, what do patents mean to him?
Yeah, I'll tell you, for example. Tomorrow I found a way how to improve the agriculture, right?
Yes.
But to improve it, I need to spend 5 years of my life, and I am going to spend $1 million developing something that later on is going to be big, right? Why would I do it if at the end of 5 years and all my money and all my time, at the end, everybody is going to take it and start selling it, and I'm left with all that gain I took it and my time. I should be paid for my, I should be rewarded for the work I have done. Otherwise, I will wait like everybody else. I will wait until somebody else does it. So that's where the importance of patent comes in. It's all the patent does is we are giving you the rights that to this idea that you invented for a short time, at least you get your money back for the that you spent, the effort that you spent, and the money that you have spent. Is that what?
He's asking technical questions, sort of, in relation to intellectual property and its management. His last question, for instance, would be, what is the best approach to generate income? Is it through royalty, leasing, the IP, or the classical transaction of just selling the intellectual property? His other question relates
that's a very interesting question, since I have done all those. I sold patent, I bought patent, I sold companies, so I know all this. That's part of the job I do. Licensing is a very tough business. If you have only, first, nobody would license an idea from you until the patent is issued. It has to have come out, issued with the number and all this, and it's guaranteed that's a patent. Then they have to analyze that patent against what exists today, because whoever is going to buy it from you, they have to use it against somebody else. If somebody else is going to use it, they have to make sure. If you have an idea that is sure, that very strong, oh yeah, you can sell them. License. There are companies that all they do today, you contact them, you give them the portfolio, and they sell it for you. The best way, because it's for me is for people you don't want to spend a lot of money, is you file the patent and you go on your prototype stuff. You do like a startup at the beginning, and you sell the idea with a product with it. That's usually the common way that people do. It has because when you go to sell or talk to other company, you show them the product. And after you show them the product, they like it, they tell you, oh, are you protected for it? Then when you pull the patent. But a patent by itself, unless it's issued and it has weathered the time, that means that people have to check it against prior art quite a bit. And there are companies that do that. So, and believe me, patent, they can go from $20,000 or the one to have seen $1 billion patent.
His other question is a bit technical. It relates to who does the legal claims of your patents? The filing, I think.
I tell people I started as an engineer and now I'm a lawyer. Unfortunately. So there are offices that do that. I'm not talking about myself. There are companies that do, but an engineer, any engineer that does not understand the idea, when you have an idea, you have to be able to say, this is what my idea is different for, from what exists before. مثلا أنا عندي كاس مثل هذا and all over the world they make them cylinders, and suddenly I make mine a square, and nobody has done a square before. I'm just giving an example. So it's clearly different. So you do that, either you write your own patent. Most people don't. 99% of the people do not write their patent because you have to be savvy as to write the claims. But you should be able to define what is the idea that you're trying to claim. You don't know how to write it in patent words, but at least you should be able to say, this is what's different in my idea, and this is what I want to protect. Then you go to this lawyer, and their job is to take that idea and formulate and put it into into lawish language. That's how it goes. In my case, I'm become good at it. I write them directly from the beginning. I write it and I give it to the lawyer exactly, claims.
So Sultan, in essence, I think part of answering your question is that intellectual properties and protecting them is an area in the legal arena. So there are people that specialize in it. Not very strong, I would say, in Oman. Unfortunately, it's still developing. And there are a lot of tricks.
And I think it's part of the ecosystem that you have to generate this type of people. You have to have a few as part of the ecosystem that should be there to take ideas of people and formulate them into patent. And usually, and even when I hire people to write patents, I look at somebody who is in electrical engineering. And usually all these patent writer, people who write patents, they used to be engineers. They go study engineering, then they switch to patent law. And when they switch, you have somebody who is in mechanical engineering, and somebody is in mechanical, material science, all that stuff. Then you have somebody who is electrical, computer science, because it's a different field. So everybody specializes in, so it depends on the idea, you give it to the right person.
Dr. Ammar, may I jump in? And there is another comment. Yesterday, there was an announcement made here in Oman that an IoT, the company is going to encourage an Internet of Things and Sensors company with almost $12 million. And the idea is they want to start with localizing the metering industry for power and electricity. And someone says, do you think these kinds of investments, even if it's encouraged by the government, with your view on the government's role in innovation, do you see this as the right building block for a future kind of Silicon Valley type of value creating entities?
Somebody has to start the ecosystem. The ecosystem is not going to come by itself. In the US, Silicon Valley, the ecosystem was created by the military. The military came and they say, we need this area, Silicon Valley is all agriculture. In the future, we want service and know-how area around 2 universities. And the way they did is they say, okay, we're going to give projects and whatever you make, we buy from you. Right? So they are encouraging, they're spending the money, and whatever you make, they take it. Because they know nobody at that time, nobody buys silicon. Silicon was something that nobody knows what it is. So they want that, they knew eventually that thing is going to become big, but you need steps until the ecosystem is get built. You need people who are designers, you want people who manufacture, you want all this, you build it. And what they did, they created, so the military did that. So you need somebody to set at the beginning, the seed them. So you need that money to get to people in the IoT. If you want to create an IoT industry, yes. What getting them to seed them and create many small companies and each one of them create something, but doing only that by itself, it's I always compare it to having ants in the ground. They go everywhere, and they will end up, even ants do not do that. They have the queen somewhere. They're all guided, they go toward the queen. So you have to have a vision and where all these small, I want IoT companies, millions of IoT companies, and I'm going to put money, but I have to direct them to what I want to do with all these. I have to be leading them somewhere. That should be a synergy that, okay, if you are doing this in this area, we're going to give you money. You have to put directive to where things are going as a vision. You cannot say, I want you to do IoT. That would lead to fragmented ideas. They have nothing to do, and the money will be wasted because it does not give a bigger picture to the country at the end.
Yeah, but thank you. If I may also, just as a follow-up question, you spoke about the importance of AI, Professor.
Yes.
Do you see AI and sensors, for example, and IoT converging together?
Let me explain. People have they have a confusion in the past. IoT came before AI, and AI started. Well, AI is an old thing, but became famous in 2010. And I could give a whole lecture why it started in 2010. IoT is nothing but sensor. They're like all the sensors. There are like 5 or 6 sensors that exist. One that measures temperature, one to measure movement, heat, pressure, whatever. There are a few sensors you use. Then you have electronic that combine them, and you measure something with them. That's what IoT is. It's a small unit that measures this sensor. Then came the AI. AI is interpretation of those things. I want to take from this data, I take it and I come up with something else out of it. I will understand it. The data is so huge that I use AI to make sense out of it. So they use all these IoTs that are located. IoT is basically their machine without, they render one sensing. It tells you, you give it something, it tells you yes or no, yes or no. But the AI gave the IoT gave it the intelligence. So they added the layer of intelligence to the IoT. And there is one more layer that people tend to forget, which is security, which is the other layer that people needed to look at it. So AI is going to be playing an amazing, huge role. I believe it's going to be the revolution, the biggest revolution of all, because literally you can throw any problem we cannot understand. We can throw AI at it, and it can help us understand it. It doesn't mean it's going to solve it, but at least it will understand it. It's a thing that we cannot understand. Especially medicine, diagnostics, you look at X-ray, and the thing I heard from a friend of mine that now you can look at an X-ray of somebody or a CAT scan or whatever, and they can predict 5 years ahead of time cancers. They can see it from the picture. And now it's creating this big problem between what is the role of doctor? They're becoming machines, or who makes the decision? If you look at the X-ray, the doctor looks at it and sees nothing. The machine is telling you have cancer. What do you tell to the patient? You have cancer or you don't? You say no, you are in trouble. You say yes, you are in trouble. So there are a lot of things that are coming that are creating some issues to the, and I always use the example of my daughter. My daughter went to Virginia Tech as a mechanical engineering student there, and they have a teacher who they give homework, and they have TAs. So he has 3 TAs, but you can talk to the TA. The TA is teaching assistant. So, but you can talk to them only on the phone, ask them questions. 2 of them are human, and 1 of them is a machine. And he give you an A grade if you figure out which one of the 3 is the machine.
Wow, that's
and
you
can ask any question you want to the machine, to them. These 2 guys also, they are into the game. You ask them, they answer the same thing, and the machine is the same. And I heard that at the end it's 50-50. Nobody could figure out.
Wow, it's that advanced.
Yeah, that advanced.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
If I may, there were two comments from two participants, Ammar and Najir. You've mentioned, Doctor, the goals and vision. And you know, you also خبرتني عن قصة ماليزيا ورئيس وزراء ماليزيا.
Yeah.
If you were to do a back of the envelope assessment of how we are doing in innovation in this part of the world, do you think we're going in the right direction, too slow, or should we adopt something like what Malaysia did and adopt it here?
My understanding is, except for a few places, I do not see a vision in most Arab countries, unfortunately. What I mean by a vision is you set a goal in 10 years, what are we going to achieve? Right? And these are, if we do these and these and these things, we set them, we're going to reach this place. We tend to create buildings and things as we go. And we are leaving it to the young people come in and do something with it. The young people, they are capable of doing a lot of things, but they are not gonna draw the vision of the whole country where it's gonna go. The vision of the whole country is people have to draw it. For example, where do we specialize our country? What are the things that we have? You cannot do everything. You have to put it in your head. Even the US now, they concluded they cannot do everything. They have specific areas. They have to focus, lock them. This is the area we work on, and we can compete in this area. So you sit as a country and you say, okay, what are my assets? Because your vision will be based on assets. What are my assets I have first? Do I have a good education? If they are, what specialty I'm in? What's the minerals I have? What are things? And what should I do? One thing or two things or three things that I have to do that I will become one of the best in the world in the future. I don't have to do all of them. Because if you leave it only to the student to do that, the student is going to do whatever they studied. They know that, they're going to develop it within this area. So all your vision is going to be a random vision distributed all over.
And you know, what you said is very interesting because, you know, a lot of people have great focus on youth, especially that our region is around 60% youth.
Yeah.
But you are, you know, I guess what you're saying is that it needs to be a lot more multi-stakeholder than that. We need, you know, seasoned, experience.
You cannot give every youth in the country do startup and keep going. Somebody comes and says, I want to do lasers, and somebody comes like, I'm going to do aerospace, and somebody comes and says, so you cannot satisfy everybody. This is life. If you do that, you're going to divide the small amount of money you have in a small, tiny project that they don't go very far. It's preferably have a certain amount of money, you do very good projects, but all of them, if you put them together, they're going to solve a big, you have a direction where you're going with it.
And there's a question from Fawaz. So can you tell us about a best practice, a country that got it right in terms of the vision and implementation for something like AI, for example, or any emerging technology field?
AI is very, it's new. Nobody has it's completely new.
Not even Singapore or Israel? Or...
Okay, I'll give you Malaysia, for example. Malaysia is, a long time ago, they decided, I talked to you about Malaysia before. I met the architects behind the whole Malaysian revolution, so to speak. It's true that the government will say, oh, we are the one doing it, but the government, at least they found the right people and they said, go and do the vision for us. That's how you should be done. So the guy goes and say, okay, we want to be #1 in design of chips and PCBs. That's the goal. So that's how you set a vision, right? This is what we're gonna do. We don't have other stuff. This is something we're gonna do. Then you say, if we want to do this, how do we get to it? Say in 10 years we're gonna get to that point. That's how we're gonna be the expert in the world. People come to us for it. Then he starts drawing. To get there, I need people who know how to do design stuff, right? But they need to be really, really good, and they know the industry. So what the guy did, he went to the university and he said, okay, I need 5,000 students in design. So he bought a lot of equipment and a lot of tools, a lot of software in the design, and he created a program. Then he said, okay, whoever got jump in this field, guarantee got a job there. So you create a certain drive, right? And all these people that are getting out from that, with that degree, they were sent overseas, placed in different companies all over the world to learn from the industry. Not only to learn from the industry, but when they came back, they have contact. So people know them, they worked with them. People used to come to the US here, in Japan and all these, they come and they pay their salaries and all that stuff. They come in, they join a company for a short time, they get to know the other engineer, and they see them, they work with the design with them. Then when they go home, they can contact those guys and say, oh, do you have any design I can do for you? So they will send to them. And at the beginning, you start probably for free, second time start to pay. That's how they drove that's how you drove the vision. So you know where you're going. You start putting the building block, how to get to it. But you cannot just say, you come in and say, I want to be the best in design. Guys, go create small startups in design. It's not gonna work.
There has to be a demand, and it has to be demand driven.
Demand, but you have to create a certain critical mass of knowledge, and to get there, you need money to get to that level. So you need to invest in it, and that's what I call by infrastructure, creating the ecosystem. Create those bases. They put money into educating all these guys, buying the equipment, getting them to the level that they know how to design, sending them everywhere to bring knowledge. So, but at the end, you will get that this engineer will find, once they have that knowledge, they will find that they do things by themselves at that time.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ammar, would you like to give a quick summary and ask maybe a professor for any last points?
I think just a reiteration of the point Professor Belgacem was mentioning. I think what he's saying is that each country or any region for that matter needs to prioritize
exactly
where it wants to focus and needs to identify what it can do and what it cannot do. There has to be compromises. So when you set your vision, you decide that I want to be good at this, but then by the virtue of deciding that I want to do A, you're also saying that I cannot do B, C, and D.
Exactly, you have to be discriminatory.
Yes. So I go back to the discriminatory nature of these decisions, and that's the whole essence of it. Is that we have to prioritize as a nation. That we want to go into a particular direction that has to be clear, and then we pour our resources into that direction, and then we have to forego that we're not going to be the best in other elements, so we're going to forego those. I see a few comments with relation to education, and I think all of us agree with that. And the first point Professor Belgacem mentioned of the 4 pillars of having an ecosystem is an educated workforce that is capable of
educated workforce with the knowledge in the industry.
Yes, capability to innovate,
Yeah.
capability to produce at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Khalid, if we are not getting any questions, then I would say in summary, the key points I picked up from the discussion today with Professor Belgacem is, you really have to believe in yourself and drive your visions forward. B, he's a strong supporter of establishing clear annual goals. And then 5-year goals. The 5-year goals are going to be a little fuzzy, but they will guide you in terms of being the true north for your compass in terms of where you're moving. Think out of the box. A very interesting career that he went through, and the main driver for him was following technology and seeing technology at the top of the organization, not being at the bottom of the food chain in the organization. Henceforth, his movement from Xperi back to Google and then back to Xperi. Work on yourself. Failure is going to be a big source of learning. You're not going to learn as much from succeeding at things as much as you're going to learn from your failures. So do not be afraid. I think a few organizations have their mantra as fail fast and fail often, because that's how you're going to learn as a person, and that's how organizations will move forward. Keen on reading history, keen on reading on the Algerian Revolution, keen on reading on agriculture and experimenting with the agriculture. I'm assuming there are a few palm trees in your backyard in there, Professor.
No, I am into the hydroponic.
Okay.
I'm putting a new system of hydroponic that applies to the Sahara Desert.
Oh, that will be neat. I have a friend that has a keen interest in this area.
It's very important for our area, yes.
Indeed, indeed. I totally agree with that. Key point Professor mentioned is that natural resources are limited by their nature. And moving into the future, innovation is going to solve our problems, and it's going to be a better economic option for us. We safeguard against being reliant, in our case, on pretty much one outcome, the hydrocarbons that we pull out of the ground. You need to question, as a society, we need to question things. Unfortunately, we've been built with this culture of accepting decisions, very hierarchical in nature. So that is something that we need to do, yet we have to respect the norms that we're operating in. So when we're innovating, we need to innovate to solve our problems, considering our unique culture. Key to succeeding in innovation is, one, having a long-term vision. And in doing so, you're going to decide that we want to do this and be very good at it, but at the same time, you'll be foregoing being excellent in other areas, and establishing an ecosystem that is built on, one, having an educated workforce that is understanding what is required in industry, that is focused on logic, focused on thinking, having financial systems in place that will provide funds via private independent entities. Not recommended that this is a publicly managed thing, because it's discriminatory in nature.
Yeah, it's okay that the government gives the money as long as somebody from outside runs it.
Yes, and the decision making, I think, is what you worry about, Professor. Yeah. Yes, an economy capable of absorbing the products of innovation and protection of intellectual property. In terms of vision, it's what we want to achieve in 10 years down the line. What we do not want to play in, the areas that we're avoiding, what our assets are the key questions that need to be answered. The questions we received were relating to intellectual property, and then they moved into the Internet of Things. But then I see that the last few comments are really focused on education, and that element seems to be something that our audience is gravitating towards. That's my summary of the discussion for the past hour and 45 minutes, Professor. So I really thank you for your time. I've learned a lot. I've enjoyed the discussion.
I always tell people, you cannot make an omelette if you don't break the eggs.
Indeed, and I think we did a bit of that. We might have cracked the shell today. So more, Professor, thank you. You've been an open book for us to read. جزاك الله خيرا.
شكرا على استضافة. It's always my pleasure. كلموني في أي وقت. I would love to help by any means, whatever I know, whatever I can.
Allah يحفظكم, Professor. I personally enjoyed it. Khalid, thank you for the invitation, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ammar. This has been not only an excellent summary, but an excellent conversation between two great minds, and I've learned a lot really today. And by the way, I've learned cooking. I have not cooked since I was studying in the States. So now I'm breaking not only eggs, trying to, and I wish I got it right. I'm still learning. 3 months onwards, and but I'm moving from experimenting on myself to experimenting on other guests. So you are absolutely right. We need to break few eggs. شكرا جزيلا على وقتك دكتور عمار. I really appreciate it, and all the guests here. Thank you so much for your questions and comments, and I promise you, صحيح البروفيسور حبيبنا عسل, but we will try not to إنه ما ننحسه كله, but we'll try to invite him again إن شاء الله to share with us his thoughts, maybe further on education, more about his life, and maybe dig a bit deeper into the beautiful things he has created, and the most important thing is his family values that are very, very close to us as well. Thank you, all the guests. Shukran, Dr. Ammar. If I may ask, Professor, if you could stay with us and the team. I just want to chat with you and the team a little bit.
Sure.